I'm Matt Ward. I, in one life, was a freestyle skier and freelancer, kind of college humor intern, and worked at YouTube for a while on the watch page. I did everything there from the actual video player experience. I was actually the last and only generation of Flash engineers. Who's with me? Yeah. All right. Kind of evolved from that into a little bit of back-end work on YouTube's watch page and kind of managed our integration with CDNs, all of the different ad teams that we would work with, annotations, all of that. And now I'm working at Mux. We call ourselves Muxologists or Muxers, or I think we're still debating what we actually are a little bit. But I'm more of a brewer than a mixologist. Anyway, so here's a little bit of a growth story for you. We all start somewhere, right? Not everybody is YouTube overnight. And so I'll be a little honest, right? This is kind of a dream growth story. This isn't what everybody goes through, and not everything in here is going to be applicable to everybody in the audience, but I'll do my best to tell you some fun little things along the way. So once upon a time when I was a freelancer, I built what people called a portal, right? It's like you had a little login, you got in there and you had your little private videos. I actually built this for a physical therapist, and what he did was film his sessions with people, kind of take that content and let them watch it again at home later. And so, you know, one of the important things to this was having private videos, right? And I should have realized that I probably should have charged him like by the gigabyte, because I didn't actually know how much service he had. He was definitely my like most revenue negative or profit negative company. I just lost a bunch of money on that guy. And at the end of the day, they ended up canning it a couple of years ago. So that ran for like 5 years. And they canned it because of security and privacy. And so I'll talk a little bit about that today too. So where do I even begin? You know, CDNs, content delivery, players, all of this stuff is a really, really big topic. I cannot cover everything today. I'm going to do my best, but there's a lot here, and you know, I'm just going to kind of go through it as best I can. So for that little kind of company that I just talked about, what is like the basics of what I need, right? I have a very simple kind of desire to just serve some video to a you know, person who's trying to get themselves better in a web browser. I need something that's cheap and works. I need something that's going to be reasonably reliable and, you know, probably secure. A couple other things that I would really like that I'll talk about as well. Let's start at the top, though. Let's start about being cheap and it works, right? So one of the things that you're going to see with CDNs is you will have variable bills from some of them. Others will give you a monthly commit, and you'll be able to say, okay, I'm going to get this much bandwidth, and I will pay you this much a month. And you know, that kind of makes it a little more constant if you're into the whole like revenue profit projections thing. If you're a business person, I'm personally not a business person, but if I was, I'd be rich. So going on to the next thing is, you know, a ton of CDNs are actually going to give you a free trial. So if you're just getting started, don't be intimidated by the forms that say, give us your contact information and we'll reach out. A lot of CDNs will say, okay, if you give us your contact information, we'll call you and set up a trial. I've had great experiences with all of that. Do it. It's worth trying out a bunch of things, right? The other thing to look at is kind of try and understand what's actually going on based on where you have your assets and where you want to serve them to, and how you kind of get the bits from one end to the other. On some clouds, you'll actually find that it's cheaper to serve data via their CDN than it is to serve directly out of your data center that you're running your machines in. You know, others might be the same exact price, right? You'll pay from egress from your machine in the data center to whatever edge node you're serving from, but you might possibly take a hit in performance. And so one of the key things you should do is actually measure this and kind of understand what's going on, right? So, but seriously though, like there are clouds where you can find this path that is cheaper than this path, right? That exists, and watch out for it and kind of use it to your advantage, right? So before we kind of really get into the weeds here, let's talk a little bit about why do I even CDN? Why do I want this thing, right? Well, we live in a really big world, and not all of your users are where your servers are. I am honestly very surprised now working in the startup world how pretty much everybody is in US East. It blows my mind, but you know, East Coast is where I'm originally from, so It's cool, you guys like us. All right, so everyone thinks serving right from the East Coast to the West Coast, it's like one straight line, no big deal. Like if I just serve all of my stuff out of US East, it's gonna be great. It's easy to serve anywhere. Well, the fact is, like, along the way, the path kind of isn't that straight and that clean, right? There's a lot of hops along the way between your origin and kind of where you're actually trying to serve to. So what actually can happen is you'll actually be using more server resources because you have congestion kind of in this last mile, and you'll be kind of spending more time with open connections because you have more retransmits and kind of all of these things than if you just kind of put a location with your server on that end, right? Because then you have this nice clean connection that fills from your origin to that closer machine, and it kind of is able to offload this connection to the closer POP. And so this gives us a number of benefits on server resources at our origin and helps us keep a cheaper and kind of leaner core part to our system. And obviously everyone knows this, right? As another person pops up, and okay, you can serve them from the same POP, right? The same point of presence that we were talking about before that we served this other guy from, because it's the close one. It's probably got the same data even, right? It makes it nice and quick and easy. This is kind of the basics of what a CDN does. But then you got these guys down here in Australia. And like, this is where things start to get interesting, right? Is what happens when you start to get a more worldwide audience is you need to start thinking about, okay, now that there's really, really long transmission times between where your content originally is and where you're trying to serve it, what are you gonna do? You really kind of need these POPs. And sometimes this is expensive, but it's worth it. You're gonna get some serious performance benefits. And if you've ever tried to use the internet in Australia, let me tell you, some sites over there are very slow, very slow. Sometimes they're better in Sydney. I've never been to Perth, but like if you're in Perth, maybe you don't have as many local POPs as you do in Sydney, and maybe some of them are even so misconfigured that they have to actually pull all the way back from wherever their origin is to actually serve you. And so, filling those POPs on the west coast of Australia might actually incur a long haul all the way back to the east coast of the United States. So one of the things you can do is chat with your CDN provider, chat with them, ask them, say, hey, do you do cache fills in the same continent from your own peers, or do you always fill caches from my origin? Talk to me about that, how that works. There's some great conversations that you can have, and a lot of people will be very open and willing to talk to you about how kind of this stuff works and what's available to you. Another thing that you should also consider is, sometimes you don't actually want two POPs. Sometimes one is fine in Australia. And yeah, it might be more expensive to have two POPs and it might be better performance, but how much better is it? You're gonna have to kind of talk and think through these trade-offs, and you're gonna have to work with your CDN provider to decide, okay, what do I actually need, right? So that's kind of one myth I wanna get over, right? Is like, the CDNs should not be judged by like how many points of presence they have, right? Your cache hit rates actually can be worse if you have a lot more POPs that you're trying to serve content from, and they're misconfigured where they're not correctly filling, or you're not utilizing the right ones based on how popular your content is. So talk to your provider, ask them, how do you do this? How do you judge what content gets served out of what POPs? Can I configure them? Can I pick which ones I want to serve out of? And ideally, you can match your kind of POPs that you're in with the density of your user base. You probably have some analytics system that'll tell you most of your users are in the United States. You probably shouldn't buy China cache or somewhere that's just in China. That's not gonna be a good investment for you. There's a number of things here that might sound obvious initially, but think about them, talk about them, and hopefully you can kind of get everything that you need from your providers. So let's kind of go back to this list of what I was talking about here and focus a little bit on reliability. There's a lot of CDNs that are gonna advertise to you that they have 100% uptime, or like 15 nines of uptime, or like we're super, super reliable. Like, I've never seen that, don't believe them, it's not gonna happen. So have a backup, figure out a plan for what happens if my primary CDN goes down, have something to back it up just in case. Especially for live, it's pretty critical to have two CDNs because you might be throwing a bunch of traffic at one CDN, they might decide for policy reasons or like they're not provisioned for it, they need to shut you down or kind of trim some of your load, and you'll need a place to kind of spill it over to. Some CDNs are going to require a monthly commit, and so you need to be ready for that. And when you're making these kind of decisions, what's my primary and my secondary CDN is how do I think about the pricing there again as well. The next thing that I want to focus on is, what happens if a chunk fails? Like, please guys, like, retry. Don't put all of your eggs in one basket. Like, if there's one thing that you get out of my talk today, please retry. Just like, do it. There were so many playbacks at YouTube that we recovered by just adding a single retry. There was all kinds of other crazy stuff that we did to try and like enhance the retry. We would like detach and reattach media sources. We'd like, try this other node over here. We did all kinds of weird things. And at the end of the day, we were able to recover tons of playbacks that wouldn't have worked otherwise because we retried and did some crazy stuff. At the end of the day, the users want to watch the video. Do your best to get it to them. Retry everything. Retry manifest. Retry that. And your CDNs, they might call you up if you're really big and you're kind of getting a little too aggressive, but work with them. Help try and, they'll give you advice. They'll help you figure out how should you retry most effectively. So, retrying can have kind of impacts on reliability, and the systems out there that say that they're reliable aren't always reliable, and things happen, things break, and the most important thing I can say to you after kind of retrying is learn from your mistakes and learn and figure out, okay, how do I design this system in a way that's really going to work in degraded modes where, okay, this part of the system's down, how do we operate, right? At YouTube, we used to joke about the 5 nines of reliability was actually 9 5s of reliability. You didn't see it because we degraded pretty well, right? As there was a lot of things that would be failing at any given moment. There'd be whole weeks that services would just be shut off and you wouldn't even notice because the system would degrade and it would know, okay, we're able to run smoothly if this system fails or that system fails. So think about that when you're designing your systems, and also know that like there's kind of compounding reliability at the end of the day, right? You're only as reliable as the most reliable system that you depend on. I think I said that right. Least, thank you, okay. I knew something was wrong with that, that's why I said, all right. I also think that there's kind of trade-offs, and like you should talk about these trade-offs with your team, with your company, right? You're not going to build the most reliable system on earth for the cheapest price. It's impossible, right? It's like what everybody really dreams and wishes they can do. They also wish that it's like super, super fast, but like making things really fast and really reliable has complexity. There's cost to it. There's also a problem that, okay, fast doesn't necessarily mean like fast in terms of speed and end user performance. It also means developer performance. Think about your developers as well. How quickly can you iterate on the system? And are the decisions and choices that you're making actually increasing developer friction, right? Think about that as well here. So back to that list. So the next thing that I really care a lot about is SSL, TLS, security, and privacy. And I just am very curious right now. A show of hands, who's serving every single piece of their content over SSL right now? I'm disappointed in every single one of you. I get it. It's not cheap. It's not cheap. CDNs will try and charge you more. Push back. Push back. Some won't. The really good ones won't. And what will happen is eventually it'll become the norm. It will become what everybody kind of expects is, we want reliable, fast networks over HTTP2. We want these things, give them to us, don't make us pay more. Because if you do, I'm gonna find someone else that's gonna give it to me for cheap. You can make these kind of decisions and trade-offs yourselves, but it's really important to have kind of privacy and security for so many reasons. I'm just gonna spend 2 seconds on one privacy reason, right? There's been a lot of things going on in the world right now. We all know this, right? There's a lot of people's lives that are at risk because of the content that their government sees them watching. protect them. Please. Please protect them. The next thing is security. Today, there are so many computers that are becoming parts of large botnets. I don't really know exactly how these things are built, but I can tell you for sure that there's a number of CVEs and a number of the tools that we all use in this room that have serious exploits in them. And if you can man in the middle the data that is flowing into those systems, you can do some really, really terrifying things, and I know that people are doing them. I'm sure of it. People are exploiting systems by jumping in the middle of your HTTP streams. Secure it, protect it, help your users out. Let's talk for a second about what does real security and privacy mean, right? You're talking end-to-end encrypted, fetching from the origin to your edge. Your disks are encrypted on the edge so that no one can actually break into the data center and steal your content, right? Think about these things, ask your providers about these things, and please, please protect your viewers. So let's go back to that list. I'm sorry that was a little serious there for a minute. I'm usually not that serious of a person, people can tell you. But there's a bunch of other things that we really need, right, that we really want. And my list is pretty big, right? I want to know what's on every single server on the internet, right? I want to know when I'm trying to make a decision for, okay, should I serve from this CDN or that CDN? I got this user over here. Is this CDN hot or is that CDN hot? That's really hard to tell. There's companies that are trying to work on this problem right now, and it's a really hard problem because CDNs aren't going to tell you what's hot on what server or not. There's a number of other features that you'll see vary from CDN to CDN. So do you want a video CDN? I think this is probably one of my most controversial slides on here is what does it mean to be a video CDN, right? Come on, guys, bits are bits. We're pushing bits from one place to another. The optimizations that you do in the TCP, HTTP level are applicable to video and a number of other large file serving over the internet. These CDN providers are doing awesome work today, improving TCP, improving the whole entire network to serve your users' content. They're giving you cool features like being able to shield your own servers, right? There's all kinds of awesome stuff. The cool things that are also happening specific to video are definitely things that could make you think, okay, this is a video CDN, right? Maybe they do on-the-fly packaging, right? They're able to change your HLS streams into dash streams on the edge or vice versa, whatever it is. That's super cool. But another myth, CDNs with the best features are the best. Wait, but the more features that I use with this CDN, the less likely it is I'm going to be able to go over to another CDN, right? And so this kind of creates this tension. And at the end of the day, I encourage you to try and avoid vendor lock-in. Try and keep your implementations as simple as possible in order to get those golden handcuffs free. And if you don't have those golden handcuffs, you're going to be able to negotiate with these CDNs and talk through, okay, this other CDN that I have that I'm thinking about using gives me pretty good performance, and they're 2 cents cheaper a gig than you. Can you help me out? I would love to try you guys out, see how you improve. They'll listen, talk to them, see what's happening, right? There's a ton of variables in these pricing. There's a ton of variables with kind of all of these conversations, but have those conversations and make sure that you're capable of switching, and it's not going to take you 2 years of engineering time to switch CDNs. That's going to really hurt your bottom line because what you're talking about for a relatively small website, right, is 100 T a month. That's a lot of videos, right? Okay, $10,000 versus $7,000 a month. That's a 30% savings or $36,000 over a year. If you're a small company, that's a lot of money, right? You're almost, I don't know what your salaries are, but that's a good percentage of your salary, I would think, right? I'd take another 36 grand a year if you wanted to give it to me. So the other thing you can do is multi-CDN, right? If you are starting to launch in China, I go back to this example because it's such an interesting market. And if you want to launch in China, there's a chance that you want a CDN that knows China really well and has POPs in China and can help you make sure that you are running well there. That might be a reason that you sign up for multi-CDN. Another reason that you sign up for it might be because you can actually get cheaper prices in other locations from another provider, and you want to be able to say, oh, well, in South America, I want to use this CDN because the performance is pretty good. I don't have a ton of users, and it's a little cheaper. So these are some of the reasons that people use multi-CDN, and the ways that we're seeing it implemented is really interesting. I think that there's 3 different ways that I've kind of seen people doing. You have kind of the quickest and easiest way, which is DNS. Right? You have short TTLs, you kind of hit the server, it's like, oh, hey, I'm getting a lookup from this person in this area, I'll make sure to kind of pick the right thing for them. The other side is like your server does that when you're writing out the actual page, and this is actually kind of similar to what YouTube was doing for a long time, and probably still doing. I don't work there anymore, but they're probably still doing it, right? Yeah? Yeah, okay, thanks, Pavel. The fact is, like, the server and the client probably are going to know better than DNS. You're probably going to get a little bit more accurate kind of decision making there. And the farther that you can kind of push this into the client, I think the more interesting things that you can do. And we're starting to see a lot of stuff in the kind of peer-to-peer space. There's a ton of benefit to peer-to-peer for certain applications, I think. On the other end, there's a ton of benefits to multi-CDN and kind of having a CDN approach that is flexible across, a number of different options. And I think we're going to see a lot of stuff kind of in the middle here. Things that are starting to get more intelligent about, okay, when do I go peer-to-peer? When do I serve from a CDN? This CDN versus that CDN versus this peer, that peer, this peer. It's a very interesting space that I think we're going to see evolve a lot in the next year or so. So I've said this a few times today, but when you're looking at all of these things, the thing that I can reiterate, I just want to reiterate the most is ask for help. This whole entire industry, this whole entire room, everybody that you see in here is super friendly, super nice, always willing to talk to you. Go talk to them. Ask them what they're doing. Ask them how they're thinking about these problems, and I'm sure you'll probably learn something. So thank you guys so much. I want to spend a couple seconds on questions, and also thank you to everybody that helped me kind of get content for these slides and these talks. And for our conference organizer too, Matt. Give that guy a round of applause as well.